Oops, sorry. Can you tell I don't have a lot of parties? This recipe comes from Toni Tipton-Martin's amazing book, Jubilee. And what first drew me to this recipe was seeing in Toni's head note something about shaking the pan as being a better way to get a smoother, more luxurious sauce than stirring. But then, as I went to cook it, I noticed some other things that I really loved about this recipe. Because of all these really powerful ingredients, they meet in the pan, and in minutes you have this incredible sauce that you want to not only eat your delicious shrimp in, but to take warm crusty bread and just sop up every bit of sauce, and that is dinner. You mince a little garlic, but you don't have to saute it in first, so it all goes into the pan pretty much at once. It also calls for a whole bunch of Worcestershire sauce, which I think is kind of a secret weapon. We've got lemon juice, white wine, fish stock, garlic, shrimp, butter, very important. And then this is the pop quiz for all these spices. Some salt, some black pepper, red chili flakes, some crumbled bay leaves, dried thyme, cayenne, dried oregano, and paprika. That's all of them. So before we get cooking, I'm just gonna call the author of Jubilee, Toni Tipton-Martin, so that she can tell us more about the story of this recipe and some tips for making it. Toni, thank you so much for joining us. I really just want to hear more about this recipe and about Jubilee.
The idea for Jubilee springs right out of the Jemima Code, and the idea of sharing the recipes was something we knew we wanted to do all along, but the Jemima Code was pretty full of information, and we thought it would be better to separate the recipes out and have some time with the concept of Black cooks and cookbooks before introducing the idea that their recipes were not going to represent the standard soul food that everybody would expect. So the shrimp that's photographed on the cover is one of our favorite dishes. My son and I have made it together for Christmas Eve when friends come over. So we really, really enjoy it.
It's such a good dish for eating with friends too. It sounds like the perfect time.
Oh yeah, and we eat it right out of the cast iron skillet, right on the stove.
Perfect.
Before it even gets into anybody's individual bowl.
I love reading your head notes. They're so beautifully written, and they contain all these different bits from different versions that you've seen. Was that the case with this recipe in particular? I know you credit B. Smith with this one, but were you also drawing from other different Creole versions of this dish?
I was, and I raised my children in Austin, Texas, and we spent time at the coast, and so a version of this dish was really popular within the beach community in Texas, and they make this dish with beer instead of wine. I was just hanging out with my kids at the beach, and some of the dads that went fishing in the morning came back with, or went shrimping, and they came back with tons of this gorgeous Gulf shrimp and made this dish. And so I think it took inspiration from Paul Prudhomme and Texas Gulf shrimpers. So I took the same approach to the dish when I began to encounter it in the cookbook, the Black cookbook. So it does appear in multiple editions with different titles. But the title that was the closest to what I was used to was the B. Smith version in her cookbook.
Got it.
I guess another one of the tips to make sure to share is that we tend to think about stir frying when we have a protein and vegetables. But here, once you've added the liquid to the pan, you definitely want to shake the pan over the heat as opposed to stirring it, because that aerates the butter and the wine and the lemons, the chicken broth, and it helps make the whole thing cohesive. It's just a nice way to get a really good body on the sauce.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's what drew me to this in the first place too, in your head note talking about that technique. And is there anything else before we dive into cooking it? Any other tips you have?
I have lots of crusty French bread to go with it. And a hot cast iron skillet. I would say those are the two essentials you want to make sure that you have Well, thanks so much for spotlighting Jubilee. It's just such a amazing expression of what I'm calling culinary reparations, that the more of us that honor these ancestors, maybe it can make up for a little bit of what's been lost and how they were represented. So I just appreciate that you guys would give this attention to them today.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the work that you do.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Ooh. Everything goes in at the same time except for the shrimp. All those spices, fish stock, all that Worcestershire, garlic, not sauteed beforehand, white wine, and lemon juice. It already smells good, but it's just gonna keep smelling even better. I love this pan shaking thing, and it makes so much sense. If you were stirring, it would probably separate out the butter from the more liquidy things. By shaking, it's reintroducing all of those liquidy things and the butter so that they incorporate in a much smoother and have a more luscious, buttery mouthfeel. Mouthfeel, not a word that I use very often outside of cooking videos. All right, I'm getting a little more vigorous with my pan shaking. And you can see, like, every time you shake it, it sort of like folds the butter back in. And it's definitely reducing down more. It's probably just about at the point where it could coat the back of a spoon. So I'm gonna check. I swiped my spoon, it left a trail, shrimp goes in now. I did ask Toni if it was okay to use peeled shrimp if you can't find peel on. It was a tough question because if you have peel on shrimp, it's gonna add so much flavor to the sauce. And in fact, if you can find head on peel on shrimp, even more flavor. If you can only find peeled shrimp to use in this recipe, you can do it, but just be much more careful. Don't cook the shrimp for as long. There's one last ingredient, and it's just some minced parsley to sprinkle over the top. Toni says to serve immediately, so I'm gonna do that. And by serve, I mean just eat it by myself here in the kitchen. But pretend like there's a whole party around here with me. Oops, sorry. Can you tell I don't have a lot of parties? I ate these like alone with my husband in the dark the first time. Okay, so put out a nice bowl for your shrimp peels. Don't sprinkle them over in front of your guests. And so spicy and buttery. But this part might be even better. You could pull these out into your own bowls and plates, but I don't recommend it. I cannot believe that only took, what, like 5-10 minutes to make overall? It's unbelievable. You cannot make this fast enough. Go make it as soon as possible. Right now, I'm telling you. You're gonna be so happy. For more genius recipes like this every single week, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel, and pick up a copy of Jubilee, Recipes from 2 Centuries of African American Cooking by Toni Tipton-Martin. I'll see you next week.